It's been nearly 2 years since the all-weather surface at Greyville was launched back in June 2014. The Polytrack is one of 20 that the Martin Collins Group have installed in 9 different countries.
When we sold Clairwood, and this all went to the members at a special general meeting, we obviously had to replace Clairwood with the surface here at Greyville that could accommodate as many meetings as possible. It was always our vision to extend the number of meetings or increase the number of meetings in KwaZulu-Natal quite significantly, which we have done. And we've only been able to do that because of the introduction of the Polytrack. Yeah, there's a view out there that the Polytrack is there to be used in emergency situations when the weather is adverse and can't use the turf. That was never the case. We sold it to the membership and to our stakeholders on the basis that it will form an integral part of our race programming. And approximately 50% of our races in a given year will be run on the Polytrack. That was made clear at the outset. It's the only reason we can stage 123 meetings a year. It eventually got down to 2 choices, the Polytrack and the Pro Ride. We went around the world to have a look at these tracks, but ultimately we made the call, I guess because Phumelela had introduced a Polytrack, we had established a relationship in the country with Martin Collins, it kind of made sense not to introduce a different surface again. So ultimately the board of Gold Circle felt that the best way to go was to row in with Polytrack throughout South Africa.
It's predominantly sand. Probably 90–95% sand. Then they add polyurethane fibers and a bit of cloth fiber. That's all then put into a blender, and then the wax binder is added after that. The wax binder varies from track to track, generally because the regions change, and then they have different melting points in the wax according to the environment that the track's located. After race days, we come in with the machine called the Gallop Master. We do a deep harrow, and then we compact the track back to its racing condition according to the manufacturer's specifications. And then every 4 to 6 weeks we do a deep, what we call a deep blend, which we use an implement called the Power Harrow that gets in rather deep and nice and slow, and it gives a thorough blend of the whole material, all the material, so that the material is recoated with the wax that's in the profiles. Everyone asks, what's this track about? It's not a living track like a grass track, but it is alive. And by alive, I mean it changes with your weather conditions. So on a warm, really hot day, sunny day, the track gets really warm, and then we need to take the sting out of the surface, and that we have to apply water. On cooler or wet days, we don't have to apply water, but then we have to harrow slightly deeper to get the same sort of underfoot conditions. An example, August last year, it was 19 degrees ambient temperature. We had a clear blue sky, and the track was sitting at 42 degrees. So you can't judge this track surface by the ambient weather. So on a really warm day, we have to apply water, but it's going to sound contradictory. It's not the total volume of water, it's the maximum amount of water you can get down in the shortest period of time. And that we have to try and do just before racing. And the purpose of that water is not to cool the whole profile of the track, it's just to cool the top 5 to 10 mils, because that is what kicks up when it gets too warm. The binder can't hold it together, and that starts to fly and then gets into the horse's nostrils, into the jockey's faces. In terms of direct sunlight, the cooler the track is, the better. But on those warm, sunny days, we found that 30 degrees is the sort of turning point in terms of kickback, and that's when we start applying water to the surface. It changes quite rapidly. If you look at the overhead conditions now, the track's sitting at about 28 degrees, and if this moved off within 15 minutes, the track could be up to 35–40 degrees quite quickly.
The water used for irrigation is not municipal, but grey water sourced from within the golf course at Greyville.
The bonus of this track is wet weather conditions. It works in converse to a turf track. When this track gets wet, the surface tends to firm up, where with the turf track, it gets muddy and soft underfoot.
Well, I think the bookmakers dislike the track and the punters love the track. That, I guess, is the short answer, because the form has held up extremely well. Obviously, as with all racing on any surface, you do get results and upsets along the way. But I think the percentage of winning favourites is higher on the Polytrack than it is on the grass for whatever reason. The form stands up really well. And we've now got to the bottom of the Polytrack, and it's all about keeping its temperature down, and it races very consistently and races very well. And the draw bias is not as pronounced on the Polytrack as it might be on the turf.
I think the Polytrack, when we initially installed it, was quite a learning curve from a managerial point of view. I think they're getting it better, and that's helping a lot. The kickback has certainly been lessened since we're placing water on the surface. We were spun a bit of a curveball by Martin Collins, who told us that he didn't think it was necessary to put irrigation on the track. I think we should have thought possibly a little bit out of the box and realised that, I think they consider South Africa similar to England, where we know that it's so much warmer here in the summer that we should have possibly challenged them a little bit more on that. But I think it's improved a lot, and it's like all surfaces. I have horses that run particularly well on the Polytrack that don't seem to run as well on the grass. But generally I've found that horses will perform almost equally on both surfaces. Yes, we've had the odd horses pull up with different kinds of injuries, from the Polytrack to the injuries that they may have experienced when they race on the grass. And that's something that I think is a bit of a learning curve for all trainers, even the veterinarians.
We've only had positive runners from the Polytrack. I think it's fantastic on the horse's legs, and I think it's a substitute for the rain or the grass tracks when it's raining, but we've only had success.
Horses pull up, a lot of the horses pull up slightly jarred up, but then they do the same on turf, so they pull up slightly jarred up. I've had one horse in the last 2 years that pulled up with a more serious injury, which was a typical Polytrack injury. I haven't got, I must be honest, I haven't really got complaints about it.
My horses continue to run well there. I was pre-warned that we're going to have a lot of unsound horses coming off the track, mainly back problems. Thank goodness I haven't experienced it. I have horses coming off jarred up, which I think you're going to get horses jarred up no matter what surface you race on. And listen, I'm very much for the Poly.
I think it's got its place, and we've had no problems with it. Our horses have pulled up well off it, and I think the only negative is probably the field size being restricted to 12.
Well, I've only had good experiences on the Polytrack, and I must say, I've heard people knock the Polytrack. I've had a lot of winners on the Poly, and I can assure you one thing: horses that pull up very sound on the Polytrack. I've had horses on the grass, I've had them on the Poly, and but I'm very, very positive about the Polytrack. I mentioned in Cape Town when they had a meeting in November, and I think I was booed down a bit by my colleagues, but it's working for me, and I said to my vets, we've had this long discussion before, but I think it's fantastic. It's a true surface. And in the summertime, for great in Durban when it rains, because the Polytrack's actually at its best when you've had water. I've had quite a bit of rain, but I'm only very, very positive about it.
Inshallah, I've actually had good experiences with it so far. I've had horses run there, they've won, they've run well. Besides, one horse didn't really take to it, but besides that, every other one has, and I haven't had much problems either with pulling up soundness-wise.
Interestingly, as many trainers declined to comment as those who did, citing reasons off-air such as barrier position bias, particularly when wet, soft tissue and hind-end injury after having raced, and varying track conditions from one race meeting to the next. It needs to be recognized that the varying success of different synthetic surfaces across the globe would indicate that the industry is clearly not yet dealing with an exact science. It's also becoming increasingly apparent that each country's climatic conditions play a greater role in the success of a chosen surface than initially thought. However, there's a genuine effort by racing operators not only in South Africa but worldwide to try and find the most appropriate synthetic surface to ensure the sustainability of racing for the good of all.
It's a track that you have to baby. You've got to look after it like with any track. But what I love about the Polytrack, it always presents itself even, it always presents itself consistent. It's much safer for horses than any grass track. No matter how well you maintain a grass track, there will always be divots, there will always be holes. When you line up on a Polytrack race, or any synthetic turf, say it's a synthetic track, your track is smooth. And that is great. Not every horse will act on it, obviously, like not every horse acts in the wet or the firm going or whatever the case may be. But for me, I think synthetic surfaces are definitely the way to go.